I got a secret to tell you today about the Sicilian Dragon. When I was a young player, I played it all the time with black, and I know its weakness. It has one fatal weakness. That's not what they talk about when they show theory summaries or things like that in articles or books, but it has a fundamental positional weakness that we will take a look into from a game in 1996. It was one of the first games where I won against a really strong grandmaster, Margeir Petursson from Iceland, who was known as a very strong theoretician and one of Iceland's best players. I think he had the rating of around 2585 at the time, and I was just what you will call a strong IM. Let's get into it. It's also a little bit about domination and how to play the middle game and stuff like that. So hang on, this will be a nice ride, I think. Anyway, I'm white. We are in Politiken Cup, which unfortunately it doesn't exist more. I still work for Politiken though, write a daily chess column, which you can not read online, unfortunately. And G6, and this is, if I go for C4 now, we will have the Margeir or Margeir or whatever it's called. Some Hungarian grandmaster was named after this. It's supposed to be slightly better for white. At the time I didn't believe it. I think I believe it now. I think I would prefer to be white after C4. But this is of course also very critical, and the bishop here. This way black gets the dragon without allowing the long castle variation, and I can show you why. Because if white goes something like this here and here in order to castle queenside, black will not play d6 but d5 in one move and will have instantly equalized. So this is not the way to play for black, and this, by the way, is the idea behind the accelerated dragon. That is exactly to accelerate something, and here it's the d pawn moving to d5 in one move. Okay, back. So that's why white goes bishop c4, castle, bishop b3. If black wants to stay in accelerated dragon territory, he has to go something maybe like a5 here. I think this is better for white, but it's very tricky stuff, and if you're a strong tactician and you like tricky stuff, you might look into this. Anyway, Margeir is not unafraid of the dragon, and here the main move is queen d2, and we will have the Yugoslav attack. But instead I play queen e2. And this is not very common. The problem with the move, of course, is that with queen d2, white prepares to play bishop h6 and exchange the strong bishop and weakening the white king. And besides that, the typical exchange sacrifice here is not possible if white can take back with the queen and doesn't have his pawn structure destroyed. So this is the problem. But there are also good things. First of all, white keeps control over this square. When after casting queenside, the rook is in the face of the queen, and it's somehow more solid to have the queen on e2, even though black sometimes can take here. This b5 stuff is not coming. So, and the reason I played queen e2 was that Johnny Hector, the Swedish grandmaster who lives in Denmark, had played queen e2 against me in an earlier game and won a great game. So I was a bit inspired by that, and I did use queen e2 with some success. I now believe it's not the best move, but it's definitely possible. I even got a winning position against Margeir in a game we might later see. Anyway, here he played, there are many moves here. I think something like rook c8 of course makes a lot of sense with the knight on c3. Knight a5 is of course not a bad move, and here Here black has to make a choice. The best move could be rook c8. The thing is, the exchange sacrifice here is not nearly as good with the knight on a5 because it's not going anywhere soon. I think on rook c8 I might even just play king b1 and allow rook takes c3 and then play something like bishop c1 to b2. That's definitely possible. Another move is a6 with the idea, very hidden point, to play e5 and trapping the knight on d4. So that's definitely a possibility. I think Bent Larsen played that against me, and I played queen d2. That's another game. We might see that. I won that game as well. So I had some decent results against the Dragon. Petursson decided to take on c3. And that somehow makes sense, but it also is a kind of a bad move. And white has a very strong move here. By the way, I promised you the big secret behind the dragon. And the thing is, of course, white often goes to exchange this one, move the h-pawn, probably only here, and opening the h-file, maybe pushing the knight away, and attacking black's king. That's the weakness. That's what you usually think as the big problem as black. But the big problem overall is, are you ready? Ta-da! The big problem is this square. This square is a very important square in the Sicilian. It's maybe the most important square on the entire board at the moment, and it's in white's control, more or less. The problem is black would love to control it with a pawn like this, but that is almost never possible with the bishop on g7 due to the weakness of this pawn. So the problem for black in the dragon is the square d5 that gives white sort of a permanent space advantage. And even though black is active, has dynamic chances and good pieces and exchange sacrifices on everywhere and so on, it's still a problem. By the way, that's part of the reason why taking this knight with the rook often is a good idea, is that white's control over d5 is not as important. So whenever a knight can jump here, it's kind of annoying for black, both because this won't become backward, but also because then the knight here is exchanged and white will have a free way on the king side to attack. Anyway, were you surprised that I took back with the c-pawn? That's very smart. The thing is that after this move, something like this makes no sense. By the way, I'm of course going to play this king here. The thing is, these pawns here are extremely solid, and the c-file might fall into my hands, as we will see in the game. So even though it's sort of an admission that black probably has a better pawn structure, sort of per se, but in reality he does not have a better structure, and white just got an extra file to both defend and attack. So c takes b3 is a very strong move, also sort of increasing the control over d5. He played queen a5, and king b1 is an obvious move. And he's still hoping for some sort of an attack here. In an earlier game, he had played king h8 against Sachs, but it makes no sense, to be honest. And I hadn't seen that game. I was not really super much into databases at the time. So g4 makes a lot of sense. Sometimes this, what you call it, pawn phalanx can be weak. But here it's kind of strong, and it's nice always to be able to kick the knight, and that's of course what I'm trying to do. Just saying, the h-file, that's too slow anyway. I'm not gonna get anything, but I would like to kick your knight and put my knight here, having very dominating knights, and this knight is bad. And also the bishops here are not really functioning optimally, and my king can always be tucked away here, where it would be relatively safe. It will take a lot of time for black to sort of get ready for that. Here comes a strong move, a3. Now that's surprising, isn't it? And the idea is manifold. One of them is if you go e6, I can go knight b4. He should probably admit that he's worse and just go back and saying, okay, and then prepare a5 and trying to, I will play rook c1, I think, and trying to sort of fight a little bit to maybe get some chances on the queen side. Instead he played rook b7. And b4 is strong, because now I'm just in time with a very important move here that is extremely essential. And here, the way to think about it is white has a better position. He just has to not mess it up. And how not to mess it up? Well, how do you mess up in the dragon? Well, suddenly black gets counterplay. What kind of counterplay could you imagine black could get in this position? If it was black to move, what would he do? Prophylactic. Yeah, you guessed it. I'm looking that way, but you should look that way. Of course, he's loving to play a5. So that makes this move obvious. Taking away this square and just getting ready to jump to that square with the knight. So this is very much on the agenda. And rook coming, and this knight here is out of the game. This one is not doing much, and this is pretty, but it's also not doing much. So I'm already clearly better with a nice control over the board, with a clear space advantage. So even though I have a double pawn on the queen side, I'm still much to favor here. And we see that he had to get the knight out, and that left this pawn here that is now horribly weak. He could play d5, but what if I go e5? He'll never get any kind of counterplay. These bishops can't do anything. So e5 necessary, and leaving this guy behind. And look at this. We are playing not to win material, because if we win material and he's allowed to sort of get his bishop to become active, he will have compensation. So don't allow any counterplay. Just prevent counterplay. Rook c1, taking over the c-file. The weakness is not going anywhere. Actually, your white is probably mostly afraid that black would sacrifice the weakness to activate his pieces. So you're just trying to keep control here. a6 and pushing him away, taking over the, and just getting in there, getting rid of the bishop pair. And we see, and this is a typical thing, he has to take, and then he's sitting back with this one, and I'm sitting with this one, and I'm having all the trumps, and of course the c-file as well. And well, at the moment I'm just threatening this one. There is no counter attack against the white king, which is totally safe. If he goes a5, I just take it and get a passed pawn. So here, but now there's no reason to allow a5. So I'm overprotecting this square, and I'm overprotecting this one, and I'm getting ready for this move, keeping control, and I'm attacking there. What more can you ask for a move? And queen d5, coming up to this square that I told you about, was the key square to the defeating the dragon. The dragon's belly is on d5. That's the soft spot, the weakness. And of course, we are having fun here, just keeping control. If you take with the rook, I would probably take with the queen, just getting into some ending where he's passive. The a pawn is a weakness, and we see that having an extra pawn on the queen side can be nice. f4, okay, that was of course a little bit annoying that we have to play f4, but opening another front is probably essential to get to this pawn, and also there's nothing hanging here if he's ever going to do something. By the way, keeps playing it pretty passively, and I just get to win the pawn. He's get the rook out, but still I'm of course a clear pawn up. And here Margeir decides to go for the counterplay against the both you can say both the queen, the king, and the pawn here. So why not keep him occupied, attacking the pawn on f7 and e5. And of course, it's annoying that he's allowed to take on h4, but this is of course a winning attack. He cannot take it because he will lose the rook and be mated at the same time. Check. And it's not changing anything. If he takes on e6, I just take back with the rook. And here, what is the threat? It's queen c4. So rook f4, keeping control, keeping all pawns intact. Creating a pass pawn and just taking is actually the easiest move. He can't really go out. He will be mated. So here, and since the queen has gotten control over this, the rook has gotten control of this square, we can put the queen here to attack. Queen h5, setting one last trap. If I take the rook, there's queen d5 check and a perpetual check, which would be annoying, but I have a very nice little move, rook f2, and it both prevents anything from taking on h6. I'm preparing rook h2, so he cannot take here due to rook h2, he cannot take here due to rook h2, and I'm also preparing to play b3, and there will be no checks at all, because this rook controls all the squares. So here Margeir gave up, and I had won against, I think at the time, the best grandmaster in my career. Later on, I of course won against a lot of strong grandmasters, but I remember I was very happy at the time. This was DM Talks. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and there will probably be more videos about the dragon, both with white and black, since I have a ton of experience in that opening. Thank you for watching.